On an evening much like any other, when the sun had completed its ancient journey westward and the sky held that particular shade of purple that exists only in the space between day and night, I sat on my porch and watched the world grow soft. The fields stretched out before me, golden stubble from the harvest catching the last of the light. And somewhere in the distance a meadowlark offered its final song before settling into silence. I had lived on this land for more than 30 years, and in all that time I had come to understand that evenings like this one were gifts. Not because anything remarkable happened during them, but precisely because nothing did. The ordinary, I had learned, carries its own quiet magic. My barn stood against the darkening sky, its weathered boards holding decades of memory. I had raised animals there once, stored hay and grain, repaired tractors on cold mornings when my breath hung visible in the air. Now it served mainly as a place to keep old things I could not quite let go of. Tools that belonged to my father, furniture that had seen better days. The accumulation of a life lived simply and without hurry. I did not visit the barn often anymore, but I liked knowing it was there, a solid presence against the changing seasons. Fireflies had begun their nightly performance, small lights blinking in and out of existence across the meadow. I watched them trace their mysterious patterns and felt the day's remaining tension leave my shoulders. This was the hour I loved most, when responsibility released its grip and the only task remaining was to breathe, to notice, to rest in the simple fact of being alive. The coffee in my cup had gone cold, but I did not mind. Some moments are not meant to be interrupted by practical concerns. And yet, as I sat there watching the stars emerge one by one, I became aware of something I could not quite name. Not a sound, not a sight, but a feeling. A gentle shift in the quality of the evening, as if the air itself had begun to pay attention. I did not feel alarmed. I felt, if anything, curious. After so many years of quiet evenings, I had learned to trust the land, to trust the night, to trust that whatever came would come gently. And so, I waited, breathing slowly, watching the darkness deepen, sensing that this evening, this ordinary evening, was preparing to become something more. The light appeared so gradually that at first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, a soft glow emanating from somewhere near the barn, warm and golden, like sunrise contained in a space no larger than a room. I set my coffee cup down on the porch railing and stood slowly, not from fear but from wonder. Lights in the night sky were common enough in the country. Satellites traced their patient paths. Airplanes blinked red and white on their journeys to distant cities. But this was different. This light did not move across the sky. It descended slowly, so slowly, like a leaf falling through honey. I walked toward it without making a conscious decision to do so. My feet carried me across the yard, past the old apple tree my wife had planted so many years ago, past the garden beds now resting beneath their autumn mulch. The light grew brighter as I approached, but never harsh. It was the kind of brightness that invited rather than overwhelmed, the way a candle draws the eye without demanding it. By the time I reached the barn doors, the glow had settled into a steady warmth that seemed to pulse gently, like breathing. I pulled open the barn door, and what I saw inside stopped me in a moment of pure astonishment. The entire interior was illuminated by a light that seemed to have no source, or perhaps every surface had become a source. The old hay bales glowed amber. The rusted tractor parts gleamed like museum pieces. Dust motes hung suspended in the air, tiny galaxies spinning in slow motion. And there, seated on a stack of wooden crates, as if they had been waiting for me all along, was a figure I did not recognize, but somehow knew. A man, or what appeared to be a man, though something about his presence suggested he had traveled very far to be here. His clothes were simple, the kind of garments that could belong to almost any era. His face was neither young nor old, but seemed to contain both, and perhaps all the ages between. His eyes, when they met mine, held a depth that made me think of wells, of oceans, of the night sky itself. He did not stand when I entered. He simply smiled, a smile so warm and genuine that I felt all my questions pause, waiting for the right moment to be asked. "You are not afraid," he said, and his voice carried the quality of many voices layered together, harmonious, unhurried. It was not a question, but I answered anyway. "No," I said, and I was surprised to find it was true. "I do not know why, but I am not afraid." "That is because you have been waiting," he replied, perhaps without knowing it, but waiting nonetheless. There are some who spend their entire lives waiting and never notice when the moment arrives. But you noticed. You came outside, you walked toward the light instead of away from it. I stepped further into the barn, letting the door swing closed behind me. The light shifted to accommodate my presence, shadows moving softly like curtains in a breeze. I realized I should offer something, some gesture of hospitality, though what one offers a visitor made of starlight I could not imagine. "Would you like to come inside?" I asked, gesturing vaguely toward the house. "I could make tea or coffee, something warm." His smile deepened, and I saw in it something like gratitude. "Your kindness is itself a warmth," he said. "I have traveled very far, through distances that cannot be measured in miles, and I have found that such kindness is rarer than it should be. But if you would sit with me here, in this place where so many of your memories live, I would be honored." I found an old wooden chair leaning against the wall and pulled it closer, settling into it with the ease of someone who has spent many hours in barns, in quiet places, in the company of mysteries that do not demand solutions. The light around us seemed to soften further, creating an atmosphere that felt less like illumination and more like embrace. "Who are you?" I asked, the question arriving naturally, without urgency. "Where have you come from?" "I am a traveler," he said simply. "Though not the kind you might imagine. I do not journey across the surface of the world, from one place to another. I journey through time itself, across the great river of years, from ages that have passed into memory to ages that exist still only in possibility. I have seen the morning of human history and walked through evenings that your grandchildren's grandchildren may yet witness. And tonight, my journey has brought me here, to your barn, to you." I sat with this for a moment, letting the words settle like stones dropping into still water. A traveler through time. In any other circumstance, I might have doubted, might have searched for rational explanations. But sitting in that light, in that presence, doubt seemed beside the point. Some truths do not require proof. They announce themselves and wait to be recognized. "Why here?" I asked. "Why me? I am no one remarkable. I have lived a simple life on this land, doing simple work. I am not a scholar or a leader or anyone of importance." The traveler leaned forward slightly and his expression grew tender. "You ask why you, as if importance were measured by the size of one's actions. But I have learned in all my journeying that the most profound truths often rest with those who have made space for them. You have made space. In your quiet life, in your willingness to sit on a porch and watch fireflies, in the fact that you walk toward a mystery instead of away from it. These are not small things. These are the very things that make a life capable of receiving wisdom." The barn creaked softly around us, the way old buildings do, settling into the night. Through a gap in the roof boards, I could see a handful of stars, familiar constellations keeping their ancient watch. The traveler followed my gaze upward, and something in his expression shifted toward reverence. "Do you know what those stars have witnessed?" he asked. "Not just the light reaching your eyes now, but all of it, the whole long story. They have watched civilizations rise and settle and transform. They have seen humanity learn and forget and learn again. They have witnessed such beauty, such courage, such moments of profound connection that if I could show you even a fraction of it, you would weep with the sheer wonder of what your kind has been and what you are still becoming. Can you show me?" The words left my mouth before I had fully formed the thought. "Can you show me what you have seen?" The traveler's eyes met mine again, and I saw in them something like a question, as if he were assessing my readiness for something I could not yet imagine. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I can show you glimpses," he said, "visions of ages past and ages yet to come. Not everything, for some things are too vast to be carried in a single night, and some things must be discovered by each generation in its own time, but enough. Enough to change the way you see the world when morning comes. Enough to remind you of truths that have been waiting, patient and eternal, for someone willing to listen." He extended his hand toward me, palm upward, and the light around us began to shift. Colors I had never seen before wove themselves through the golden glow, subtle as the difference between one note and another, distinct enough to be recognized. I did not take his hand immediately. Instead, I asked one more question, the question that seemed most important. "Why? Why show me? What is it you want me to understand?" The traveler's smile returned, softer now, almost gentle enough to be called love. Because you are part of the story, he said. Every human being who has ever lived, who lives now, who will ever live, is part of the story. And the story is not a straight line from past to future. It is a great river with countless tributaries all flowing together, all connected. When I show you what has been and what may be, I am not showing you something separate from yourself. I am showing you your own belonging. I am reminding you that you have never been alone and that you never will be. I reached out then and placed my hand in his. His touch was warm, solid, utterly real, despite everything about him that defied explanation. And as our hands connected, the barn around us began to fade, not disappearing, but becoming transparent, like a dream within a dream. Through its fading walls, I saw something else beginning to emerge. A landscape I did not recognize, a sky that held different stars, a world that existed in a time so distant from my own that the number of years between us had no meaning. Come, the traveler said, his voice now somehow inside my mind as well as in the air around me. Let us walk together through the ages. Let me show you what humanity has been and what it has always had the potential to become. Let me show you why hope is not foolishness, but wisdom, and why the peace you feel in this moment is not an accident, but your birthright. And together, still seated in my old barn on an ordinary evening in the country, we began to journey through time itself, toward visions I could never have imagined and truths I had somehow always known. The barn dissolved around us like morning mist lifting from a meadow, and in its place arose a world so beautiful that I felt my breath catch in wonder. We stood, or seemed to stand, on a gentle hillside overlooking a river valley that stretched toward distant mountains, still wearing their caps of snow. The light here was different from any light I had known, softer somehow, as if the sun itself had learned to be gentle. And everywhere I looked, I saw evidence of human presence woven so seamlessly into the landscape that it was difficult to tell where nature ended and cultivation began. This is an age long before your own, the traveler said, his voice carrying the same warmth it had held in the barn. Countless generations before your grandfather's grandfathers drew their first breath. A time when the world was younger and perhaps wiser, in ways that have since been forgotten. Watch, listen. Let yourself feel what these people understood. Below us, the valley spread like a tapestry of green and gold and gentle brown. Terraced gardens descended the hillsides in graceful curves, following the natural contours of the earth rather than imposing straight lines upon it. I could see figures moving among the terraces, tending plants with movements so unhurried they seemed almost ceremonial. No one rushed, no one shouted. The entire scene unfolded with the patience of clouds crossing a summer sky. They grew food here, I said, though it was obvious. But it looks different from any farming I have known. They did not think of it as farming, the traveler replied. They thought of it as conversation, a dialogue between human need and the land's willingness to provide. They asked the earth what it wanted to grow, and then they helped it grow. They did not force. They did not deplete. They participated in a relationship that had been developing for generations before them and would continue for generations after. We began to walk down the hillside, though I could not feel the ground beneath my feet. It was as if we moved through the scene while remaining somehow apart from it, observers granted access to a moment preserved across the vast distances of time. As we descended, details emerged that I had not noticed from above. The terraces were bordered by flowering plants that attracted bees and butterflies in clouds of gentle motion. Small channels carried water from terrace to terrace, the soft sound of flowing liquid creating a constant music beneath the bird's song. A woman knelt beside one of the channels, adjusting stones to redirect the water's flow. Her movements were precise but unhurried, and her face held an expression of deep concentration that was somehow also relaxation. She was fully present in her task, I realized, neither thinking about what she had done before, nor worrying about what she would do after. She was simply here, tending the water, participating in the ancient agreement between her people and this land. In your time, the traveler said, many people have forgotten how to be fully present. The mind wanders constantly, pulled toward past regrets and future anxieties. But these people understood that presence itself was a form of nourishment. When you are truly here, wherever here may be, you draw sustenance from the moment. You become part of the flow rather than struggling against it. I watched the woman complete her task and rise, brushing soil from her knees. She paused for a moment, looking out across the valley with an expression that I can only describe as satisfaction. Not the satisfaction of accomplishment, but the deeper satisfaction of belonging. She knew her place in this landscape. She understood her role in the ongoing story of her people and this land. And that understanding gave her a peace that radiated from her like warmth from a hearth. We continued down into the valley, toward a cluster of buildings that emerged from the landscape as naturally as the trees that shaded them. The structures were made of stone and earth and living plants, their walls covered with climbing vines that bore small flowers and, in some places, ripening fruit. There were no sharp angles here, no aggressive assertions of human dominance over nature. Everything curved, everything flowed, everything seemed to have grown rather than been built. Their homes, the traveler explained, were designed to be comfortable in all seasons without requiring the burning of great quantities of fuel. The thick walls kept them cool in summer and warm in winter. The orientation of doors and windows caught breezes in hot weather and blocked cold winds in the colder months. They had learned, through many generations of observation and adjustment, how to live well by working with the world rather than against it. Inside one of the buildings, I glimpsed a family sharing a meal. They sat on cushions around a low table, passing dishes from hand to hand, their conversation too quiet to hear, but clearly unhurried. Children sat among the adults, not separated but included, learning through presence how to be members of a community. An elderly man spoke, and everyone listened with attention that was also respect. Then a young woman responded, and the elderly man listened with the same attention. Age commanded respect here, but so did every voice willing to contribute thoughtfully. They understood something your era has largely forgotten, the traveler said, that the wisdom of elders and the fresh perspectives of youth are both necessary, that a community needs its memory and its imagination working together. The old remembered what had been tried before, what had succeeded and what had failed. The young asked questions that had never been asked, saw possibilities that familiarity had made invisible. Together, they navigated the challenges of existence with a completeness that neither could achieve alone. We passed through the village, which I saw now was larger than I had first realized, its buildings spreading along the river in a gentle sprawl that never became crowded. Everywhere I looked, I saw evidence of care. Gardens tended with attention, paths swept clean, tools stored neatly when not in use. But this care did not feel like burden or obligation. It felt like the natural expression of people who valued their surroundings and found satisfaction in maintaining them well. Near the river's edge, a group had gathered beneath a great tree, whose branches spread wide enough to shade a small field. Some sat, some stood, some reclined on the grass, but all were oriented toward a figure at the center of the group, an older woman whose gray hair was bound with simple cloth, and whose hands moved expressively as she spoke. I could not hear her words, but I could see the effect they had on her listeners. Some nodded, some smiled, some closed their eyes as if absorbing something precious. "She is a keeper of stories," the traveler said. "Every community here has one, sometimes several. They hold the memory of their people not in written records, but in narratives passed from one generation to the next. The stories contain practical wisdom about the land, about the seasons, about what plants heal and what practices maintain harmony. But they also contain something more. They contain meaning. They remind the people who they are, where they came from, and what they value. In your era, many have lost their stories. They have forgotten the narratives that once gave their lives shape and significance. And without stories, humans become unmoored, drifting without direction." I watched the storyteller for a long moment, captivated by the way she held her audience not through drama or suspense, but through something quieter. She was not entertaining them. She was nourishing them, feeding them something their spirits needed as surely as their bodies needed the food from those terraced gardens. "What story is she telling?" I asked. "A story about patience," the traveler replied. "About a young person who wanted everything to happen immediately and had to learn, through gentle experience, that some things cannot be rushed, that seeds take time to grow, that relationships take time to deepen, that wisdom takes time to mature. It is a story they have told for many generations, because each generation needs to learn this truth anew." The scene shifted slightly, the way dreams shift, and we found ourselves at the edge of a marketplace as evening began to settle over the valley. But this was unlike any market I had ever seen. There was no haggling, no aggressive selling, no anxiety about prices and profits. People moved among the stalls with the same unhurried grace I had observed everywhere in this place, examining goods with appreciation, exchanging what they had for what they needed, pausing often to converse with the vendors and with each other. They did not use money as you understand it, the traveler explained. They had developed a system based on contribution and need. Those who grew food shared with those who made tools. Those who made tools shared with those who wove cloth. Everyone contributed what they could, and everyone received what they needed. It was not perfect, no human system ever is, but it was suffused with trust. They knew each other, they depended on each other, and that mutual dependence was not experienced as weakness, but as strength. A musician had begun to play near the center of the marketplace, a stringed instrument I did not recognize, producing sounds that were at once complex and soothing. People paused in their exchanges to listen, some swaying gently, some simply closing their eyes and breathing. The music was not performance in the way I understood performance. It was gift, offered freely to anyone who wished to receive it, enhancing the atmosphere without demanding attention. As the last light of day painted the western mountains in shades of rose and amber, the market began to quiet. Vendors packed their remaining goods without haste. Families drifted toward home, children sometimes riding on adult shoulders, sometimes running ahead and then circling back, full of the energy that comes from being safe and loved and free. The air grew cooler, and with the cooling came the scent of evening meals being prepared, smoke rising from chimneys and thin, peaceful streams. Why did this end? I asked, the question carrying a sadness I had not expected to feel. What happened to these people, to this way of living? The traveler was quiet for a moment before responding. Nothing ends completely, he finally said. Everything transforms. The wisdom of this era did not disappear. It scattered, like seeds carried by wind to distant places. It went underground during difficult times, preserved by those who remembered even when remembering was dangerous. And it continues to exist, waiting to be rediscovered, waiting for those who are ready to receive it. What you are seeing is not a paradise that was lost. It is a possibility that remains available, a way of being that humans can choose whenever they are ready to choose it. The evening deepened around us, stars emerging in a sky free of any light pollution, each point of brightness sharp and clear and ancient. Somewhere in the village, voices rose in song, not a performance, but a natural expression of gratitude for another day, another meal, another evening spent in the company of those one loved. The song was simple, its melody rising and falling like breath. And as I listened, I felt something in my own chest begin to ease. A tension I had carried so long, I had forgotten it was there. "This is what you wanted to show me?" I asked. "That humans once lived this way? That peace like this is possible?" "This is the beginning of what I wanted to show you," the traveler replied. "There is so much more. So many ages, each with its own gifts, its own wisdom, its own way of addressing the eternal questions of how to live well, and how to die well, and how to love well while we have the chance. But yes, this is where we begin, with the reminder that your species has depths of wisdom that your current age has largely forgotten. That peace is not a naive fantasy, but a practical possibility. That the anxiety and hurry and disconnection that characterize so much of modern life are not inevitable, but chosen, and what can be chosen can be unchosen. The scene began to shift again, the valley fading like a dream upon waking, though the feeling it had evoked remained warm and steady in my chest. I knew I was still in my barn, still holding the traveler's hand, still an ordinary person on an ordinary evening in the country. But I also knew that something had changed, that I had seen something true, and that truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. "Where will we go next?" I asked, curious now, in a way that felt more like eagerness than anxiety. "To another age," the traveler said, "a time when humans discovered that building together could be a form of prayer, a time when patience was considered the highest virtue, and when people thought in generations rather than days. Come. There is still so much to see, and the night, though it feels long, holds only so many hours." And the light shifted once more, carrying us forward through the great river of years toward another shore, another era, another glimpse of what humanity has been and what it has always had the potential to become. The river valley faded like watercolors dissolving in rain, and gradually a new landscape emerged around us. We stood now on elevated ground overlooking a vast plain where something extraordinary was taking shape. At first, I could not comprehend what I was seeing. The scale was too large, the activity too complex, the vision too ambitious for my mind to immediately grasp. But as my eyes adjusted to this new era, I began to understand. They were building something. Not a house or a barn or even a village. They were building something that would take generations to complete, and they were building it with a patience I had never witnessed. This is an age when patience was considered the highest virtue, the traveler said, echoing words he had spoken before, but now giving them context that made them bloom with meaning. A time when humans understood that some things worth creating cannot be finished in a single lifetime. Watch how they work. Listen to the rhythm of their labor. There is something here that your era desperately needs to remember. Below us, hundreds of people moved across the construction site, but moved is perhaps too urgent a word. They flowed, they drifted with purpose. They carried stones and mixed mortar and climbed scaffolding with a steadiness that suggested they had all the time in the world. Because in a sense, they did. The structure rising before them was not meant to be finished quickly. It was meant to be finished well, and finishing well, they understood, required releasing the need for completion within one's own lifetime. The building itself was difficult to describe, partly because it was still so incomplete, and partly because its design seemed to incorporate elements I had never seen combined before. Great arches rose toward the sky, supported by columns carved with intricate patterns that caught the light and seemed almost to move. Walls curved in ways that defied the straight-line architecture I was accustomed to, creating spaces that would be both vast and intimate. Gardens had already been planted in completed sections, as if the builders could not bear to wait for the whole to be finished before introducing beauty into the parts. "What is it?" I asked. "What are they building?" "A place of gathering," the traveler replied. "A space where communities from across this region will come together to share knowledge, to celebrate, to mark the passages of life, to remember their dead and welcome their newborn. But more than that, it is a gift from this generation to all the generations that will follow. They will never see it completed. Their children may never see it completed, but their grandchildren, or perhaps their grandchildren's grandchildren, will gather in these halls and remember those who began what they now enjoy." I watched a woman directing a team of workers who were carefully positioning a massive stone into place. Her movements were precise but never rushed. She consulted with her team, listened to their observations, adjusted her guidance based on their input. When the stone finally settled into its position, there was a moment of collective satisfaction. Not celebration exactly, but something quieter and perhaps deeper. An acknowledgement that they had done this small part well, that this stone would remain in this position for centuries, that their care today would become someone else's shelter tomorrow. "In your era," the traveler continued, "people often feel that if they cannot see immediate results, their efforts are wasted. They want to plant seeds and harvest fruit in the same season. They want to start projects and finish them before their attention wanders to something new. But these builders understood something different. They understood that meaning does not require completion, that the act of contributing to something larger than oneself is its own reward, regardless of whether one lives to see the final result." We descended toward the construction site, passing through groups of workers who could not see us, but whose presence I could feel nonetheless. The sounds of this place were surprisingly gentle. Yes, there was the tap of chisel on stone, the scrape of mortar being spread, the creak of wooden scaffolding. But there was also conversation, laughter, and beneath it all, the steady rhythm of purposeful work that did not exhaust but sustained. Near a great arch that rose nearly complete against the sky, I saw an older man sitting with a young girl. They were examining a piece of stone together, the man's weathered hands guiding the girl's smaller ones across the carved surface. He was teaching her something, I realized. Not just the practical skill of stonework, but the philosophy that made such work meaningful. "My grandfather helped raise the first columns," I heard him say, his voice carrying clearly across the dusty air. "I have worked here since I was your age, and I We'll work here until my hands can no longer hold a chisel. You will work here after me, and your children after you. And one day, long after all of us have returned to the earth, someone will stand in the completed hall and feel the presence of everyone who contributed. Our hands will be in these stones forever." The girl listened with an attention that seemed beyond her years. She did not fidget or look away. She understood, even at her young age, that she was being invited into something sacred. Not sacred in the sense of religious ritual, though this place might serve religious purposes once complete. Sacred in the sense of being set apart, made meaningful, invested with the accumulated intention of countless hands and hearts. "They do not feel burdened by this?" I asked the traveler, knowing they will never see the finished result. "They feel honored," he replied. "To be part of something larger than oneself is not a burden, but a liberation." Think about it. In your era, so much anxiety comes from the pressure to accomplish everything within a single lifetime, to make your mark, to leave your legacy, to prove that your individual existence mattered. But these people do not carry that pressure. They know their existence matters because they are contributing. The contribution itself is the meaning. The completion is almost beside the point. We walked further into the construction site, past workshops where craftspeople carved the intricate patterns that would adorn the walls, past kitchens where meals were being prepared for the workers, past sleeping quarters where those who had labored through the morning now rested before returning to their tasks. The whole site functioned like a small city, self-contained and self-sustaining, organized around the singular purpose of creating something beautiful for those not yet born. In one of the workshops, I watched a woman carving a design into a block of stone that would eventually become part of a window frame. The pattern was astonishingly intricate, filled with shapes that seemed to reference plants and animals and celestial bodies all woven together into a harmonious whole. Her tools moved with practiced confidence, each stroke removing exactly the right amount of stone, each curve flowing naturally into the next. "How long has she been working on that single piece?" I asked. "Several seasons," the traveler said, "and it will take several more before she considers it complete. In your time, such duration would be seen as inefficiency. Here, it is understood as necessity. Some things cannot be rushed without being ruined. The beauty that will emerge from that stone exists because she is willing to take the time it requires. She is not fighting against time. She is working with it, allowing it to be her partner rather than her enemy." The woman paused in her work, setting down her tools and stretching her back. She stepped away from the stone and looked at it from a distance, her eyes moving, slowly across the pattern, assessing what was there and what remained to be revealed. Then she smiled, a small private smile of satisfaction, and returned to her work. She was in no hurry. She had found her rhythm, and within that rhythm, she had found peace. As the afternoon light began to shift toward the golden tones of early evening, I noticed workers beginning to set aside their tools. But they did not rush off to other activities. Instead, many of them gathered in small groups, sharing food and drink, talking quietly about their work and their lives. The boundary between labor and leisure here seemed permeable, almost non-existent. Work was not something to be endured until one could escape into enjoyment. Work was itself a form of enjoyment when it was meaningful and when it was shared. "What do they talk about?" I asked, watching a group of young workers lounging on a partially completed staircase. "Everything," the traveler said. "The progress of the construction, the quality of this season's crops, who is courting whom, what dreams visited them in the night. The same things humans have always talked about when they gather together. But there is something different in their conversation, something your era often lacks. There is time. Time to finish a thought. Time to listen fully before responding. Time to sit with silence when silence is what the moment requires." I noticed an older worker join the group, settling himself onto the stairs with the careful movements of someone whose body had known decades of labor. The young workers made space for him naturally, without fuss, and soon they were all engaged in a discussion that seemed to move seamlessly between serious reflection and easy humor. The elder was respected, but he did not dominate. He listened as much as he spoke, and when he did speak, his words carried the weight of experience shared generously, rather than authority imposed. In this time, the traveler explained, the generations understood that they needed each other. The young needed the wisdom of the old, the memory of what had been tried and what had worked. The old needed the energy and fresh vision of the young, the willingness to question and imagine. Neither generation saw the other as a problem to be managed. They saw each other as essential partners in the ongoing work of building something meaningful. The sun continued its descent, painting the rising walls of the great structure in shades of amber and rose. Workers began to light torches that would allow some to continue their tasks into the evening, while others rested. The whole site took on a warmer glow. The harsh edges of stone softened by firelight, the vastness of the project made more intimate by the gathering darkness. I watched a father walk his young son through the construction area, pointing out different elements, explaining what each would become when finished. The boy asked questions with the boundless curiosity of childhood, and the father answered each one with patience and evident pleasure. He was not simply teaching his son about architecture or construction. He was teaching him about belonging, about being part of something that stretched backward into memory and forward into hope. "This is what it means to think in generations," the traveler said quietly. "Not to see one's life as an isolated unit, beginning at birth and ending at death, but to see it as a link in an endless chain. The contributions of those who came before make your existence possible. The contributions you make now will make future existences richer. When you understand this, when you truly feel it, the desperate need to accomplish everything yourself begins to dissolve. You realize that your role is not to build the entire structure. Your role is to add your stones carefully, skillfully, lovingly, and then to pass the work to those who will continue after you are gone." The scene had grown quieter now, the active labor of the day giving way to the gentler activities of evening. Some workers had retired to their quarters to sleep. Others sat in small groups, sharing stories, or simply enjoying the companionship of tired bodies at rest. A few musicians had brought out instruments and were playing softly, not performing, but simply adding music to the evening air like another form of starlight. I realized that I had never seen a construction site like this. In my experience, building was always accompanied by stress, by deadlines, by the pressure to finish quickly and move on to the next project. But here, the building itself had become a way of life. Generations had grown up knowing that their purpose was to contribute to this creation. And that knowledge, rather than feeling like imprisonment, seemed to offer them freedom. Freedom from the anxiety of having to find meaning. Freedom from the exhaustion of constantly starting over. Freedom to invest deeply in something they knew mattered. "I think I understand," I said to the traveler, "but how do I carry this back to my own time? We do not build like this anymore. We do not think in generations. Everything is immediate, urgent, demanding completion before we have even begun." "You carry it back by remembering," the traveler replied, "by understanding that the pace of your era is a choice, not an inevitability. By finding your own equivalence of this great construction, the things you can contribute to without needing to see completed. Perhaps it is a garden that will mature long after you are gone. Perhaps it is wisdom passed to younger generations who will carry it forward in ways you cannot imagine. Perhaps it is simply the way you live, the patience you model, the reminder you offer by your very presence that another pace is possible." The structure before us seemed to glow in the last light, its incomplete arches reaching toward stars that were beginning to emerge. It was beautiful in its unfinishedness, beautiful because it held so much promise, so much intention, so much faith in a future that the builders would never see. "Shall we continue?" the traveler asked. "There are more ages to visit, more wisdom to receive, but carry this one with you as we go. Let it settle into your bones, the gift of patience, the freedom of contributing without completing, the peace that comes from knowing you are part of something larger than your single fleeting life." I nodded, feeling the truth of his words echo in the quiet places of my heart. And as the construction site began to fade around us, giving way to whatever era would emerge next, I held on to the image of that woman carving her intricate pattern into stone. Seasons of work for a single piece. A lifetime of contribution to a structure she would never see finished. And on her face, not frustration, not despair, but the unmistakable expression of someone who had found her purpose and was at peace. The great construction faded like a dream, releasing its hold on the waking mind. And in its place, something altogether different began to take shape. I found myself standing at the entrance to a vast space carved into the living rock of a mountainside. its opening framing a view of distant valleys that seemed to stretch toward the edge of the world itself. But it was not the view that captured my attention. It was what lay within. As my eyes adjusted to the softer light of this interior space, I began to understand that I was looking at one of the great libraries of human history, a place where knowledge had been gathered and preserved and shared across generations beyond counting. "This is an age when knowing was considered a form of kindness," the traveler said, his voice carrying a particular warmth that suggested this era held special meaning for him. A time when the pursuit of understanding was not a competition but a communion. When questions were valued as highly as answers, and when the admission of not knowing was considered the beginning of wisdom rather than its failure. "Come, let me show you what it meant to truly love learning." We passed through the entrance and into a space that seemed to expand impossibly as we moved deeper. The library was not a single room, but a network of chambers and corridors and alcoves, all carved from the same warm stone that seemed to glow with an inner light. Shelves lined every wall, rising towards ceilings that disappeared into shadow, and on those shelves rested more scrolls and books and tablets than I could have counted in a lifetime of counting. Yet, despite the overwhelming quantity, there was no sense of chaos. Everything had its place. Everything was arranged with care that spoke of generations of attentive stewardship. "How many works are held here?" I asked, my voice unconsciously dropping to barely more than a whisper, the way one speaks in the presence of something sacred. "No one knows precisely," the traveler replied. "The collection has grown for so many generations that counting has become less important than caring. What matters is not the number of texts, but the knowledge they contain and the wisdom with which that knowledge is shared. These people understood something that your era often forgets. Information alone is not wisdom. Data alone is not understanding. Knowledge becomes meaningful only when it is received with readiness and applied with care." We walked deeper into the library, passing through chambers dedicated to different branches of understanding. One held works of natural philosophy, observations of plants and animals and the movements of stars accumulated across centuries of patient watching. Another contained histories, not the dry recitation of rulers and conquests, but living narratives that preserved the voices of ordinary people, their hopes and struggles and small daily victories. Still another was dedicated to poetry and song, the walls lined with collections of verse that had been composed across countless generations, each adding its voice to an ongoing conversation about what it means to be human. In an alcove set apart from the main passages, I saw a young man seated at a low desk, a scroll spread before him, his finger tracing the ancient text with the reverent attention of someone encountering something precious. His lips moved slightly as he read, not speaking aloud but forming the words silently, letting them settle into his mind and heart. A small lamp burned beside him, its flame steady in the still air, providing just enough light for his task. He looked utterly absorbed, utterly content, as if there were no place in the world he would rather be. "He has been studying that particular text for many weeks," the traveler said, "not because it is required of him, but because something in its words calls to something in his soul. He will return to it again and again throughout his life, finding new meanings each time, understanding it more deeply as his own experience deepens. This is how they approach knowledge here, not as something to be consumed quickly and discarded, but as a relationship to be developed over time." We moved on, leaving the young scholar to his contemplation, passing through a corridor that opened onto a garden set in the heart of the library complex. I had not expected gardens within a library, but here they flourished in the gentle light that filtered down from openings carved high in the stone walls. Flowering plants grew in carefully tended beds. Small trees offered shade, and the soft rustle of leaves in a breeze that seemed to find its way even into this protected space. And scattered throughout the garden were benches and cushions where readers could sit among the growing things while they pondered what they had learned. Knowledge and beauty, the traveler explained, were not considered separate pursuits. These people understood that the mind needs rest, needs refreshment, needs exposure to living things in order to remain vital and open. A scholar who did nothing but study would eventually become dried out, empty, unable to receive new understanding. But a scholar who balanced study with time, spent among flowers and birdsong, and the play of sunlight on water, could continue learning for a lifetime without exhaustion. In the garden, I saw an elderly woman seated beneath one of the small trees, a book closed in her lap. her eyes gazing at something I could not see. Perhaps she was remembering. Perhaps she was contemplating what she had just read. Perhaps she was simply resting in the beauty around her, allowing her mind to digest the knowledge she had consumed. Whatever her inner experience, her outer presence radiated a peace that seemed to belong naturally in this place, as if she had grown here like the flowers surrounding her. "She has been a keeper of knowledge for most of her life," the traveler said. "She knows more about certain subjects than anyone else in this region, perhaps anyone else in the world. But watch how she carries that knowledge, not as a burden, not as a source of pride. She carries it as a trust, something precious that was given into her keeping and that she must eventually pass on to others." I watched the woman rise slowly, stretching her back with the careful movements of someone who has learned to be gentle with an aging body. She picked up her book and walked toward a nearby pavilion where a small group had gathered. They looked up as she approached, their faces lighting with the particular expression of students who genuinely love their teacher. She settled among them, not above them, but with them, and soon they were engaged in a conversation that moved between question and response with the easy rhythm of music. "What is she teaching them?" I asked. "At the moment, they are discussing a philosophical text written many generations ago. But the specific content matters less than the method. See how she asks more questions than she answers? See how she draws out their own thinking rather than simply filling them with her conclusions? She understands that true teaching is not the transfer of information from one mind to another. True teaching is the awakening of understanding that was already waiting, dormant, within the student. Her role is to ask the questions that allow that understanding to emerge." I listened to the gentle murmur of their conversation, unable to hear the specific words, but somehow understanding the essence of what was happening. The students were not passive recipients. They were active participants in their own learning, contributing their observations, questioning their assumptions, building understanding together with their teacher as guide rather than dictator. The atmosphere was one of mutual respect, of shared curiosity, of the kind of joy that comes from genuine intellectual engagement. We continued through the library, passing reading rooms where scholars sat alone with their texts, discussion halls where groups debated questions that had been asked for, its centuries, quiet corners where individuals simply sat in silence, absorbing the accumulated wisdom that surrounded them like a gentle pressure on the soul. Everywhere I looked, I saw evidence of the same values: knowledge treated with reverence, questions welcomed as treasures, understanding pursued not for power or profit, but for the simple joy of understanding. In one of the larger halls, I witnessed a ceremony that seemed to mark a transition of some kind. A young woman stood before an assembly of scholars, her face solemn but also luminous with barely contained emotion. An elder was speaking words I could not hear, but the meaning was clear from the context. The young woman was being welcomed into the community of knowledge keepers. She had studied for many years, had demonstrated not just her learning, but her character, and was now being entrusted with responsibilities that would shape the rest of her life. "This is no small thing," the traveler said, watching the ceremony with evident appreciation. "To become a keeper of knowledge here is not simply to hold a position. It is to take a vow, to promise that you will preserve what has been entrusted to you, that you will share it generously with all who seek it, that you will add to it carefully, testing new understanding against old wisdom before claiming its truth, that you will teach with patience and humility, remembering always that you too are a student who will never stop learning." The young woman bowed to receive a symbolic object from the elder, some token of her new status that I could not clearly see. When she rose, her eyes were bright with tears, but they were tears of joy, of gratitude, of the overwhelming emotion that comes from being admitted into something larger than oneself. The assembly responded with soft sounds of welcome and approval, and then the ceremony dissolved into informal conversation, the new keeper surrounded by colleagues who had become her family. As evening began to settle over the library, the quality of light changed in ways that transformed the space. Lamps were lit throughout the complex, their warm glow creating pools of illumination within the larger darkness. The effect was one of intimacy, of constellation, as if each lit space were a small world complete in itself, yet connected to all the other small worlds surrounding it. Scholars continued their work in some areas, while others closed their books and prepared to rest. The library did not sleep exactly, but it grew quieter, more contemplative, as the day released its hold. "They light the lamps at evening, not just for practical illumination," the traveler explained, "but as a a recognition that knowledge continues even when the sun withdraws. That understanding burns steadily through the dark hours, that somewhere in this vast collection, in this very moment, someone is discovering something that will change their life. The lighting of the lamps is an act of faith in the ongoing human project of trying to understand. I watched as a lamplighter moved through the corridors, touching flame to wick with movements so practiced they seemed almost automatic, yet retained a quality of attention that made each lighting a small ceremony. Behind him, the library came alive with soft light, the shadows retreating to leave the books and scrolls visible, available, waiting for hands that might reach for them even in the deep watches of the night. In a reading alcove near where we stood, a mother had settled with her young daughter, a picture book open between them. The child pointed at images while the mother read words in a voice pitched low enough to respect the library's atmosphere, but warm enough to convey the magic of the story. This was how it began, I realized. This early introduction to the joy of books, this first experience of how words on a page could open windows into other worlds. The child was too young to understand most of what the library contained, but she was not too young to begin learning that knowledge was a gift worth treasuring. The children are welcomed here from their earliest years, the traveler confirmed. Not to begin formal study, that comes later, but to simply be present in this atmosphere, to absorb the value that surrounds them, to form associations between books and love, between learning and comfort. By the time they are old enough for structured education, they have already been shaped by years of positive experience. They approach knowledge not as an obligation to be endured, but as a pleasure to be pursued. The mother finished the story and closed the book, but neither she nor her daughter seemed ready to leave. They sat together in the warm lamplight, the child's head resting against her mother's shoulder, both of them simply being in this place that clearly held meaning for them. Perhaps the mother had come here as a child herself. Perhaps she was passing on a tradition that had shaped her own life. Whatever the specific history, the scene radiated a sense of continuity, of knowledge and love intertwined, of wisdom passed from generation to generation through small, intimate moments like this one. What happens to all this? I asked, the question arising from a deeper question I had not yet articulated. Does this survive? Does this wisdom continue? Knowledge is resilient, the traveler replied, more resilient than you might imagine. Libraries have burned, texts have been lost, whole traditions of learning have been disrupted and scattered, but knowledge has a way of persisting, of finding new homes, of being rediscovered and rebuilt. What you see here is not a single library in a single place and time. It is an expression of something that runs through all of human history. The love of understanding, the drive to know, the recognition that our brief lives are enriched beyond measure when we participate in the great conversation that stretches from the first humans who wondered at the stars to the future generations who will wonder at things we cannot yet imagine. The library had grown quieter still, the evening deepening toward night. Fewer scholars remained at their studies. More lamps had been extinguished, leaving only essential illumination to guide anyone who might walk these corridors in the dark hours. The vast collection seemed to breathe around us, patient and enduring, confident that morning would come and readers would return and the endless work of understanding would continue. "Shall we move on?" the traveler asked gently. "There are more ages to visit, more facets of human wisdom to explore, but carry this place with you. Remember that knowledge, pursued with humility and shared with generosity, is one of the greatest gifts humans give to one another. Remember that every book you have ever read connects you to everyone who has ever read it or ever will. Remember that you are part of this great library, this ongoing conversation, this endless, beautiful attempt to understand." I took one last look around, letting my eyes rest on the shelves, the lamps, the few remaining scholars bent over their texts. Then I nodded, ready to continue the journey, carrying with me the quiet peace of a place where knowing was kindness, and questions were treasures, and the admission of not knowing was the beginning of everything worth learning. The library dissolved around us like ink dispersing in clear water, its vast repositories of knowledge giving way to something altogether different. Where there had been stone corridors and endless shelves, now there emerged a landscape of such tranquil beauty that I felt my breath slow in response, my shoulders drop, My entire body recognized that we had arrived somewhere dedicated to the restoration of weary souls. A valley spread before us, cradled between gentle hills that seemed to embrace the space rather than merely surround it. The air itself carried a quality of softness, as if even the atmosphere here had been designed to comfort. This is an era when healing was understood as an art of presence and compassion, the traveler said, and his voice had taken on a particular tenderness that suggested this age held deep meaning for him. A time when those who tended the unwell recognized that the body often knows its own way back to wholeness when given rest and care and the nourishment of genuine connection. Here, healing was not something done to a person. It was something that happened within a person, supported by a community that understood its role. We walked into the valley, passing through meadows where wildflowers grew in profusion, their colors shifting with the changing light as clouds moved slowly across the sky above. I noticed paths winding through these meadows, but they were not straight paths designed for efficient travel. They curved and meandered, following the natural contours of the land, inviting anyone who walked them to slow down, to notice, to let go of the urgency that illness so often brings. The paths are designed this way on purpose, the traveler explained, following my gaze. They call them healing walks. Someone recovering from illness or grief or exhaustion is encouraged to walk these paths without destination, without hurry, letting the body find its own pace and the mind release its grip on worry. The curbs prevent rushing, the flowers invite attention. The very design of the space supports the process of becoming well. Along one of these paths, I saw an elderly man walking with slow, careful steps, pausing frequently to rest on benches that had been placed at thoughtful intervals. A younger person walked beside him, not guiding or directing, but simply accompanying, adjusting their pace to match his without making a show of accommodation. They spoke occasionally in quiet tones, but mostly they simply walked together, the companionship itself seeming to be part of the medicine. We continued deeper into the valley, where buildings emerged from the landscape as naturally as trees. These were not the imposing structures of hospitals I knew from my own time, with their harsh lights and sterile corridors, an atmosphere of urgency. These were sanctuaries, built low to the ground, their walls made of natural materials that seemed to have grown rather than been constructed. Gardens surrounded each building, filled with plants chosen not just for beauty, but for their healing properties, their soothing scents, their ability to attract butterflies and songbirds that added their own gentle medicine to the air. They understood here that healing happens not just in the body, but in the mind and spirit as well, the traveler said, as we approached one of these sanctuaries. A person might come here with a physical ailment, but the healers knew to treat the whole person. The anxiety that often accompanies illness, the isolation that can make recovery so much harder, the loss of meaning that sometimes strikes when the body fails. All of these were addressed alongside the physical symptoms because all of them affected the body's ability to restore itself. Through an open doorway, I glimpsed a room designed with such care that every element seemed chosen to support rest and recovery. The windows were positioned to catch natural light throughout the day, but they could be covered with soft cloth when darkness was needed. The bed was low and wide, piled with coverings that looked impossibly comfortable. Plants grew in corners, their leaves filtering the light and releasing subtle fragrances. And beside the bed sat a chair, clearly intended for visitors who would come to sit with whoever rested here, providing the medicine of human presence. In your era, the traveler observed, those who are unwell are often isolated, placed in rooms where efficiency takes precedence over comfort, attended by strangers who have too little time to truly see them. The technical care may be excellent, but something essential is missing. These people understood what that something is: connection. The simple fact of being seen and known and valued even when, perhaps especially when, one is at one's most vulnerable. We moved through the sanctuary grounds, passing through spaces dedicated to different aspects of healing. In one garden, people sat quietly among plants known for their calming properties, their fragrances mingling in the air to create an atmosphere of peace. In another area, I saw what appeared to be a warm pool, its surface steaming gently. Several people floating in the water, with expressions of such deep relaxation that they seemed almost asleep. Nearby, a building housed what looked like treatment rooms, but even these had windows open to gardens, bringing the outside in, refusing to separate healing from the living world. A woman emerged from one of these treatment rooms, moving with the unhurried grace that characterized everyone I had seen in this era. She wore simple clothing and carried a basket filled with herbs and flowers. Her face held an expression of focused attention, mixed with something I could only describe as love, though it was not the personal love of family or romance. It was a more expansive love, a genuine care for whoever she was about to tend, simply because they were human and in need. She is what they call a companion of healing, the traveler explained. Not a physician in the sense you might understand, though she has extensive knowledge of the body and its ailments. Her primary role is to be present, to listen deeply to those she tends, to notice not just their symptoms, but their fears, their hopes, the particular texture of their suffering. She has been trained for many years, not just in the science of herbs and treatments, but in the art of attention, the practice of truly seeing another person. I watched as the woman entered another building and emerged a few moments later with an older man leaning slightly on her arm. They walked together toward one of the gardens, the woman adjusting her pace to his without any visible effort, as if his rhythm had become her rhythm, simply through the act of walking beside him. They found a bench among the flowers and sat, and I could see her lean toward him slightly, listening as he spoke, her entire posture communicating that he had her complete attention. What he is telling her, the traveler said, is not primarily about his physical symptoms. Those she already knows. What he is sharing is his life, his fears about what will happen to his family if he does not recover, his memories of being strong and capable, and how strange it feels to depend on others, his gratitude for the care he has received, and his guilt at taking so much when he has so little to offer in return. She listens to all of this not because it is her duty, but because she understands that being truly heard is itself a form of healing. The conversation continued for a long while, the woman occasionally responding, but mostly simply present, holding space for whatever the man needed to express. I noticed that his posture gradually shifted as they talked. The tension in his shoulders eased, his breathing deepened. Something in his face softened, as if a weight he had been carrying alone was now shared and therefore lighter. When they finally rose to continue their walk, he moved with noticeably more ease than when they had sat down. We wandered further into the valley as the afternoon light grew golden, finding ourselves in an area where several families had gathered. Children played quietly while adults tended to tasks that seemed both practical and healing, preparing food, weaving cloth, simply being together in the warm light. Among them moved people who were clearly recovering from illness or injury, not separated from the community, but integrated into it, participating as much as their condition allowed, receiving support without being defined by their need for it. They did not believe in isolating those who were unwell, the traveler observed. Unless someone's condition required solitude, the preference was always for connection. A person healing from a broken bone would still join communal meals, still hear stories in the evening, still feel part of the fabric of daily life. This integration served multiple purposes. It prevented the loneliness that so often slows recovery. It reminded the community of its interdependence, its shared vulnerability, and it normalized the reality that every human will sometimes need care and sometimes be able to offer it. A young woman sat at the edge of the gathering, her arm bound in a healing wrap, watching the children play with an expression of mingled sadness and hope. An older woman approached her with a cup of something warm, settling beside her on the grass without invitation, but also without intrusion. They sat in companionable silence for a while, then began to talk, their conversation too quiet for me to hear, but clearly meaningful to both of them. She lost more than the use of her arm for a time, the traveler said gently. She lost someone dear to her. The injury and the grief arrived together, as sometimes happens. The healers here understand that bodies and hearts are not separate systems. The care she receives addresses both, because both must heal if she is to become whole again. The evening began to settle over the valley, that particular quality of light that softens every edge and invites the body toward rest. Lamps were lit in windows, warm glows appearing throughout the sanctuary grounds, creating an atmosphere of such comfort that I felt my own tension draining away simply from witnessing it. Somewhere in the distance, a gentle music had begun, not a performance, but a simple offering, voices blending in harmony as natural as birdsong. Evening rituals here are particularly meaningful, the traveler explained. The transition from day to night is understood as a vulnerable time for those who are healing, Old fears tend to surface in darkness. Pain often intensifies when there are no distractions. So, the community gathers at dusk to sing, to share a meal, to remind everyone that they are not alone as night approaches. It is not elaborate, it is simply presence, offered at the moment when presence is most needed. We walked toward the sound of the singing and found a large open pavilion where perhaps 50 people had gathered. Some sat, some reclined, some stood with arms around others. The song they shared was simple, its melody rising and falling like breath, its words expressing gratitude for the day that was ending and trust in the night that was coming. Those who were too weak to sing simply listened, held by the sound, surrounded by a community that would not let them face the darkness alone. When the song ended, there was a moment of silence that felt full rather than empty. Then gradually, people began to move toward a meal that had been prepared and laid out on long, low tables. The food was simple but beautiful, arranged with care, offered as another form of healing. Those who were well enough served those who were not. Those who could not eat solid food received broths and teas. Everyone was fed according to their need, and the feeding itself was treated as sacred. I watched a young boy carefully carry a bowl to an elderly woman who could not easily rise. He moved with such concentration, such clear desire to complete his task well, that the simple act became almost ceremonial. The woman received the bowl with gratitude that transformed her tired face, and I saw in that exchange something that my era had largely forgotten. The knowledge that caring for one another is not a burden, but a privilege. That being of service to those in need enriches the one who serves as much as the one who receives. Children are included in the work of healing from their youngest years, the traveler noted, not with tasks beyond their capacity, but with small, meaningful contributions that teach them early that they have something valuable to offer. By the time they are grown, caring for others has become as natural as breathing. They do not need to be convinced of its importance. They have experienced its rewards since before they can remember. The meal wound down slowly, without anyone seeming to rush toward its conclusion. Conversations continued. The youngest children began to drowse against their parents. The sick and the weary were helped back to their resting places by companions who would sit with them until sleep came. The whole process had the quality of a dance long practiced, everyone knowing their part, everyone moving together in a rhythm that supported the whole. In one of the small buildings nearby, I glimpsed a scene that captured everything I had been witnessing. A very old man lay in a bed that had been positioned near a window open to the night garden. His breathing was slow and shallow, and I understood, without being told, that he was approaching the end of his life. Around him sat several people, some holding his hands, some simply present, all of them radiating a calm acceptance that seemed almost impossible given the circumstances. "They do not fear death here as your era fears it," the traveler said softly. "They have seen it too often, too intimately, to maintain the illusion that it can be defeated or avoided. Instead, they have learned to accompany it, to make the passage as peaceful as possible, to surround the dying with love so complete that the fear dissolves. It is perhaps their most profound teaching, that death itself can be healed, not prevented, but transformed from an enemy into a threshold, a transition, another stage in the great journey." I watched as one of the companions began to sing softly, a gentle melody that seemed to contain within it all the sorrow and all the beauty of a human life ending. The others joined in, their voices blending into a sound that was at once mourning and celebration. The old man's breathing seemed to ease, his face to soften, as if the music were carrying him somewhere he was ready to go. "Healing," the traveler said as we turned away to give them their privacy, "is not always restoration to what was before. Sometimes healing is the acceptance of what is. Sometimes it is the release of struggle and the embrace of peace." These people understood that. They did not promise cure. They promised care. They promised presence. They promised that no one would suffer alone or die unaccompanied. And in that promise, they offered something your era has largely lost. The night had fully settled now, stars appearing above the valley, the air cooling but still gentle. Throughout the sanctuary grounds, small lights glowed in windows where companions sat with those who could not yet sleep. Somewhere, the soft music continued, a thread of sound connecting all the separate spaces into a single community of care. "What can I carry from this place?" I asked, feeling the question rise from somewhere deep. "How do I remember this when I return to a world that has forgotten so much of what these people knew?" You carry it by practicing it, the traveler replied. By sitting with those who are suffering without trying to fix or flee. By listening deeply when someone needs to be heard. By remembering that your presence itself is medicine, perhaps the most powerful medicine there is. You cannot rebuild this sanctuary in your own time, but you can create small spaces of healing wherever you go. A moment of true attention, a willingness to accompany someone through their fear. The simple gift of not looking away when looking is what is needed. The scene began to shift around us, the valley of healing giving way to whatever era waited next. But before it faded completely, I held on to the image of that old man surrounded by companions, singing him through his transition. I held on to the young boy carrying the bowl, the woman listening on the bench, the paths that curved to prevent rushing. All of it, a testament to what humans can create when they understand that caring for one another is not a distraction from life, but its very essence. I would carry it with me, this vision of healing as presence, as accompaniment, as love made practical. I would carry it back to my own time, however imperfectly, and try to live its truth. The valley of healing faded gently, its sanctuaries and gardens dissolving into soft light that seemed to carry the warmth of all the care I had witnessed. For a moment, we moved through a space that was neither one era nor another, a threshold between times. And then gradually, a new world began to emerge around us. This one was different from all that had come before. Where the previous ages had been marked by quiet industry or contemplative study or tender care, this era pulsed with something else entirely. Not urgency, not frenzy, but a kind of vibrant aliveness that seemed to fill every corner of the scene, taking shape before my eyes. This is an age when joy was considered a communal responsibility, the traveler said, and I heard in his voice something new, a lightness that had not been present in the more solemn eras we had visited. A time when humans understood that celebration was not frivolity, but necessity. That the soul needs festivals as surely as the body needs food. That gathering together in shared happiness was not an escape from the difficulties of life, but one of the essential ways those difficulties could be borne. We stood at the edge of a village that had been transformed by preparation for something wonderful. Every surface seemed to have been touched by hands intent on creating beauty. Colored cloths hung between buildings, their gentle movements in the evening breeze creating the impression of a world breathing slowly in anticipation. Lanterns waited unlit along pathways and in windows, promising illumination when darkness came. Flowers had been gathered from fields and gardens and arranged in cascades of color wherever the eye might rest. The entire place had become a canvas for communal artistry. "What are they celebrating?" I asked, watching as villagers moved through the transformed streets, adding final touches, stepping back to admire their work, making small adjustments with the care of artists perfecting a masterpiece. "The turning of the season," the traveler replied, though the specific occasion matters less than the practice itself. They mark many moments throughout the year with celebrations like this one, the longest day and the longest night, the times of planting and harvest, births and deaths and marriages and comings of age. Any transition worth noticing becomes an opportunity to gather, to honor, to remember that life itself is worth celebrating even in its most ordinary passages. A group of children ran past us, their laughter trailing behind them like ribbons in the wind. They were helping in their own way, carrying smaller items to where they were needed, running messages between the adults, coordinating the preparations. But their help was woven through with play, and no one seemed troubled by this mixing of work and joy. One small girl stopped to rearrange a pile of flowers she had been carrying, selecting the prettiest one to tuck behind her ear before continuing on her errand. We walked into the village, passing through preparations that seemed to involve everyone. In an open square, a wooden platform had been erected where musicians would later perform. Around it, people were arranging seating and laying out mats where dancers would have room to move. The atmosphere was one of happy industry, voices calling to one another with requests and suggestions, and occasional jokes that drew laughter from all who heard. "Notice that no one directs this from above," the traveler observed. "There is no single authority deciding how the celebration should unfold. Instead, there are traditions, practices that have developed over many generations, and within those traditions there is room for individual creativity. This family has always been responsible for the lanterns. That group has always led the opening songs, but within their roles, each person brings their own gifts, their own ideas, their own particular way of contributing to the whole. Near the center of the square, I watched an elderly man working with several younger people to assemble what appeared to be a large musical instrument, something between a drum and a bell, its surface covered with designs that seemed to tell stories from generations past. The old man's hands moved with practiced certainty, but he also stopped frequently to explain what he was doing, to let the younger ones try a step themselves, to share not just the task, but the knowledge behind it. He has assembled this instrument for more festivals than he can count, the traveler said, and he has taught others to do it just as he was once taught. When he is gone, the knowledge will continue, the celebration will continue, the joy will continue, passed from hand to hand across the generations, like a flame that never quite goes out. As evening approached, the village began to fill with people from surrounding areas. They arrived in small groups, families and friends traveling together, bringing contributions to the shared feast that would be part of the celebration. Each arrival was greeted with genuine warmth, embraces and exclamations of pleasure at seeing familiar faces. Even strangers, travelers passing through who had heard of the festival, were welcomed with the same open hospitality, invited to join in as if they had always belonged. They understood that joy expands when shared, the traveler explained. That there is no scarcity of happiness, no need to hoard it or protect it from outsiders. The more people who join a celebration, the richer it becomes. 100 people sharing a meal together do not each receive less than if they had eaten alone. They receive more because the meal has become something beyond mere food. It has become communion. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose that seemed to have been chosen specifically to complement the decorations below. A hush fell over the gathering crowd, not silence, but a quieting and attentiveness. And then, from somewhere near the great instrument in the square, a single voice began to sing. The song was simple, its melody rising and falling like breath, like waves, like all the natural rhythms that pulse through existence. Other voices joined, one by one at first, then in clusters, until the entire village seemed to be singing together. It was not a performance with audience and performers. Everyone was both. Everyone added their voice to the shared sound, whether strong and practiced or wavering and uncertain. The song made room for all of them. "This is the opening," the traveler said quietly, his own voice blending with the music around us. "The moment when the celebration officially begins." But notice that the beginning is not a firework or a fanfare or any sudden dramatic gesture. It is a song that grows gradually, that invites rather than demands participation, that gathers the community into a single shared breath before the festivities unfold. When the song ended, there was a moment of silence that felt sacred. Then the first lantern was lit, a single flame touched to a single wick, and from that single light, 1,000 others began to catch. The flame passed from hand to hand through the crowd, each person lighting the lantern of the person beside them, until the entire village glowed with soft, warm light. The effect was magical, transforming the ordinary streets and squares into something out of a dream. The fire passing from person to person represents their interconnection, the traveler explained. Each light depends on the lights that came before it. Each flame will help kindle flames that come after. They are reminded in this simple ritual that they do not shine alone, that their individual light is part of a larger luminescence that no single person could create, but that all of them together can sustain. The feast began soon after, long tables appearing throughout the village, laden with food that had been prepared by many hands. The dishes represented the diversity of those gathered, recipes passed down through families, regional specialties from different villages, simple breads alongside elaborate confections. Everyone ate from common plates, passed dishes to neighbors, offered tastes of their contributions to anyone curious enough to try. I watched an elderly woman serving portions of a dish she had prepared, her face glowing with pride as people exclaimed over its flavors. For her, this was not merely food, but love made tangible, hours of preparation transformed into something that could nourish both body and connection. The young man, who complimented her, most enthusiastically received an extra portion, along with a pat on the cheek, and his laughter joined all the other laughter rising into the lantern-lit night. In your era, the traveler observed, meals are often rushed affairs, consumed alone or with minimal attention. But these people understood that eating together is one of the most fundamental human rituals, that breaking bread with others creates bonds that words alone cannot forge, that the simple act of nourishing one another is itself a celebration of our shared humanity. After the feast came music of a different sort, rhythmic and inviting, drawing people from the tables toward the open square, where the great instrument now added its deep resonant voice to the ensemble of players. The dance that emerged was not a performance by trained dancers, but a communal movement, rings of people circling the musicians, steps that were simple enough for anyone to learn, but complex enough to engage those who had practiced for years. I watched children dance beside grandparents, young couples beside widows who remembered dancing with partners long gone. The steps connected them across generations, movements that had been performed at festivals beyond counting that would continue to be performed at festivals yet to come. Each dancer added their own subtle variations, their own expressions, their own way of inhabiting the ancient patterns, and this personal touch within the traditional form was not merely tolerated, but celebrated. They do not separate art from life, the traveler said as we watched the dancing continue. In your time, creativity has often become professionalized, something done by specialists while others merely consume. But here, everyone is a creator. Everyone sings and dances and decorates and cooks. The quality varies, of course. Some are more skilled than others, but the participation itself is what matters, the shared act of making something beautiful together. A young woman separated from the main dance, moving with a grace that suggested years of practice. She performed a series of movements that seemed to tell a story, her body eloquent with meaning I could sense even without understanding the specific narrative. Other dancers paused to watch her, forming a circle of appreciation, their faces lit with admiration that held no envy, only joy at witnessing excellence in their midst. When she finished, the circle erupted in sounds of approval and gratitude. She bowed, but not deeply, acknowledging their appreciation while remaining clearly one of them rather than above them. Then she melted back into the communal dance, her exceptional moment complete, the shared movement resuming with her as one dancer among many. That is how they relate to excellence, the traveler explained. It is recognized and celebrated, but it does not separate. She has a gift, and she shared it. Now she returns to the common dance, enriched by having given, and they enriched by having received. There is no pedestal, no permanent elevation, just the flow of gifts within a community that understands itself as one body with many parts. The night deepened around the celebration, but no one seemed concerned with the hour. Children who grew tired were gathered onto laps or into arms, dozing against shoulders while the adults continued their socializing. The music shifted to slower melodies, the dancing becoming less energetic, but no less meaningful. Conversations deepened as the wine loosened tongues, and the intimacy of the lantern light encouraged sharing. In one corner of the square, I saw a group gathered around an older man who was clearly telling a story. His hands moved expressively, his face shifting to portray different characters, his voice rising and falling with the narrative's emotional arc. His audience was rapt, responding with gasps and laughter and murmured appreciation at exactly the right moments. This too was part of the celebration, this ancient art of turning experience into tale, of making meaning through narrative. Stories are woven through everything they do, the traveler noted. Their festivals always include telling, remembering, passing down. Each gathering becomes an opportunity to strengthen the threads that connect past to present, to ensure that the wisdom and experience of those who came before is not lost but carried forward into the future. A young couple slipped away from the gathering, finding a quiet corner where they could sit close together and watch the celebration from a slight distance. Their private moment within the public joy seemed entirely natural, entirely welcomed. The community did not demand constant participation. It made room for intimacy within its embrace, understanding that personal connection and communal belonging could nourish each other rather than compete. I found myself feeling something unexpected as I watched the festivities continue, not just admiration for what these people had created, but a kind of longing, a recognition of something I had not known I was missing. Joy in my own time had become so often solitary, pursued through individual consumption rather than shared creation. Celebrations had become scheduled obligations rather than organic expressions of communal life. What these people had, what they were demonstrating in every lantern and every dance step and every shared plate of food, was something my era desperately needed. "Can this be recreated?" I asked the traveler. "In a time so different from this one, so fragmented and hurried and alone, can people find their way back to this kind of celebration?" "It can be approached," he replied thoughtfully. "Not recreated exactly, because every age must find its own forms, but the essence can be recovered. The understanding that humans need to gather and celebrate and create beauty together. The practice of marking transitions with shared ritual. The willingness to participate rather than merely consume. These things are not lost forever. They are waiting to be remembered." The celebration was beginning to quiet now, not ending but settling into its later phases. Some had left for bed, carrying sleeping children. Others remained, their conversations growing softer, their laughter less frequent but somehow deeper. The musicians played on, but gently, providing a backdrop for connection rather than a call to dance. A woman began to sing alone, her voice rising clear and pure into the night air. Others joined gradually, adding harmony, creating a sound that seemed to gather all the joy and gratitude and connection of the evening into a single shared expression. It was a song of thanks, I realized, though I could not understand the words. Thanks for the day that had passed, for the community that had gathered, for the simple miracle of being alive together in a world that could hold such beauty. As the song faded into silence, the traveler touched my arm. "Carry this with you," he said, "not as nostalgia for something lost, but as evidence of what is possible. Joy is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Celebration is not escape from reality. It is one of the ways reality becomes bearable and even beautiful." These people knew that, in their own way, in your own time, with whatever community you can gather, you can know it too. The lanterns began to dim around us as the scene prepared to shift once more. But before the celebration faded completely, I held on to the image of all those lights spreading from person to person, each flame kindled from another, each glow connected to all the rest. 1,000 small lights making one great illumination, a village of individuals making one living community. Joy shared becoming joy multiplied, as it had always been meant to be, as it could always be again. The final lantern lights flickered and faded, the sounds of celebration dissolving into a hush that felt like the world drawing breath. For a long moment we moved through that quiet threshold between eras, and then gradually a new landscape began to emerge, one so different from the village square that I needed time simply to absorb what I was seeing. We stood at the edge of a great forest, trees rising around us with the patient majesty of beings who had witnessed centuries pass like seasons. The air here was alive with scents I had nearly forgotten existed, the rich perfume of growing things, of soil and moss and flowers that opened only in shade. And everywhere, woven through the green and brown and dappled light, I sensed a presence I could not name. "This is an era when humanity lived in conscious partnership with the living world," the traveler said, and his voice had taken on a quality of reverence that seemed to match the cathedral-like space around us. A time when forests and rivers and creatures were understood not as resources to be exploited, but as kin to be honored. These people discovered something profound, that when humans choose to belong to the land rather than merely owning it, both the land and the humans flourish in ways that neither could achieve alone. We walked into the forest along a path that wound respectfully between the great trees, never cutting through where it could curve around, never disturbing what could be left undisturbed. The path itself seemed almost alive, its edges soft with moss, its surface carpeted with fallen leaves that cushioned each footstep. I realized that someone maintained this path, kept it clear enough for walking while allowing it to remain part of the forest rather than an imposition upon it. "The paths here are tended by those who walk them," the traveler explained. "Not by a separate group of workers, but by everyone who passes. Each person removes a fallen branch, clears a stone, adds to the soft covering that protects the earth beneath. Over time, through countless small contributions, the paths become what you see now, a collaboration between human intention and natural process." Through the trees I glimpsed movement, and as we drew closer, I saw a young woman kneeling beside a stream, her hands cupped in the clear water. She was not simply drinking. Her posture suggested something more intentional, more attentive. Her eyes were closed, her lips moving slightly as if in conversation with something I could not see. When she finally drank, she did so with the reverence of someone receiving a gift, rather than the carelessness of someone taking what was freely available. "She is thanking the water," the traveler said. "It is a practice here, acknowledging the gifts that sustain life before receiving them. Not because the water requires thanks, but because the thanking transforms the one who gives it. When you approach the world with gratitude, when you recognize that even the simplest necessities are miracles, you begin to live differently. You take only what you need, you give back what you can. You become part of a relationship rather than a transaction." The woman rose and continued along the stream, her bare feet moving with the sureness of someone who had walked these paths since childhood. She bent occasionally to examine a plant, to note the level of the water, to observe some small creature going about its business. Her attention was both practical and loving, the attention of someone who genuinely cared about the well-being of this place and everything in it. We followed the stream as it wound deeper into the forest, emerging eventually into a clearing where a village had been built with such sensitivity to its surroundings that I nearly missed it at first. The homes were not structures that stood apart from the landscape, but dwellings that grew from it. Walls incorporated living trees, their branches trained to form roofs and doorways. Gardens merged seamlessly with wild growth, cultivated plants mingling with native species, in arrangements that seemed both intentional and natural. "They do not build by clearing and constructing," the traveler explained. "They build by listening and responding. Before they create any dwelling, they spend long seasons observing the place where it will stand. Where does water flow when rains come? Where does the sun fall at different times of year? What creatures live here, and how can their needs be accommodated alongside human needs?" The building process is a dialogue, not a monologue. In the center of the village, I saw what appeared to be a gathering space, though it bore no resemblance to any town square I had ever seen. Great trees formed its boundaries, their canopies interweaving overhead to create a living ceiling. The ground was carpeted with soft growing things that could withstand gentle foot traffic. Stones had been arranged for sitting, but they were arranged as they might have fallen naturally, without the rigid geometry of formal architecture. Several elders sat in this space, engaged in what seemed to be an important discussion. But as I watched, I realized they were not simply debating among themselves. They kept pausing to observe the forest around them, to listen to sounds that carried through the trees, to consider input from sources I could not perceive. Their deliberation was inclusive in a way that extended beyond the human participants. "They are deciding where to extend the village," the traveler said. "New families have grown, and new dwellings are needed. But the decision is not simply where humans would find it most convenient to build. The decision involves the entire community of life that shares this place. The deer who pass through here on their ancient paths, the birds who nest in particular groves, the plants that grow only in certain conditions. All of these have voices in the discussion, though they speak in languages that must be carefully attended." An older man rose from the gathering and walked toward the edge of the clearing, where a stand of young trees marked the boundary between village and wilder forest. He stood there for a long while, simply looking, simply listening. Then he knelt and placed his palm flat against the earth, closing his eyes in an attitude of deep attention. When he returned to the group, he spoke quietly, sharing whatever he had learned from that intimate communion with the land. "He has been a speaker for the forest for many years," the traveler explained. "It is a role that requires decades of learning, of developing sensitivity to the subtle languages of the natural world. He cannot literally hear the trees speak, but he can perceive patterns, feel disturbances, sense what the land needs and what it can offer. His voice in the council represents all the beings who cannot speak for themselves in human words." We moved through the village, observing the rhythm of daily life that unfolded around us. Everywhere I looked, I saw evidence of the same mindful relationship with the natural world. A woman harvesting vegetables from her garden paused to examine each, plant carefully before picking, taking only what had ripened while leaving what needed more time. A man repairing a section of his home's living wall worked slowly, giving the plants he trained time to adjust to their new positions, murmuring encouragement as if to growing children. Children played at the village's edge, their games weaving between the trees with an ease that suggested they had grown up knowing these woods as intimately as they knew their own homes. But even their play held a quality of awareness. They stepped carefully around emerging seedlings. They lowered their voices when passing a nest. Their joy was uninhibited, but also mindful, exuberance tempered by the understanding that they shared this place with countless other beings who deserved consideration. "They learned this from their earliest days," the traveler observed, "not as rules imposed from outside, but as a way of being modeled by everyone around them. To be human in this culture means to be in relationship. With other humans, yes, but equally with the trees, the animals, the water, the soil, the air. To harm any part of this web is to harm oneself. To nurture any part is to be nurtured in return." As the afternoon deepened, I watched a group of villagers preparing to enter a section of forest that clearly held special significance. They gathered at its edge, adjusting their clothing, quieting their voices, centering themselves in some internal preparation I could sense but not fully understand. Then, one by one, they passed between two ancient trees that stood like guardians at the entrance, pausing briefly to touch the bark in what seemed to be a gesture of greeting and request. "That grove is where they go to listen most deeply," the traveler said. "Not everyone enters, not every day, but when important decisions must be made, when guidance is needed, when the relationship between humans and forest needs attention, certain individuals go there to seek wisdom. They do not pray in the way your era might understand prayer. They simply open themselves to whatever the forest might communicate." I watched the last of them disappear into the green shadows, and though I could not follow, I could imagine what they experienced within. The profound quiet of an old forest, the complex symphony of small sounds that emerges when human noise withdraws, the feeling of being held by something vast and patient and infinitely alive. I had experienced fragments of this in my own life, moments in wild places when the artificial urgency of human concern seemed to dissolve, when I felt myself part of something much larger than my individual existence. These people had built an entire civilization around such moments. Evening began to settle over the village, but the transition here was not the abrupt shift I knew from my own time, artificial lights snapping on to banish darkness. Here, the gathering dusk was met with acceptance, even welcome. Fires were kindled in hearths that had been designed to use minimal wood. Candles were lit with care. The village did not fight the darkness, but made peace with it, allowed it to draw close, created small pools of warmth and light within its embrace. A family gathered for their evening meal in a home whose open walls allowed the forest to feel present even indoors. The food they shared came largely from their own garden and the surrounding woods, prepared simply, served with evident gratitude. Before eating, they sat in silence for a moment, not in formal prayer, but in something more direct, an acknowledgement of all that had contributed to this nourishment, the plants that had grown, the rain that had fallen, the soil that had held the roots, the hands that had tended and harvested and prepared. "This gratitude is not performance," the traveler said. "It is not something they do because tradition demands it. It is something they feel because they understand the truth of their interconnection. Every bite of food represents a gift from the living world. Every breath contains oxygen released by countless plants. Every moment of existence depends on relationships so complex and so generous that genuine gratitude is the only appropriate response." After the meal, the family moved outside to sit beneath the stars that were beginning to appear through gaps in the forest canopy. They talked quietly, telling stories of the day, sharing observations about changes in the forest, remembering ancestors who had lived in this place before them. The conversation wove between practical matters and deeper reflections. The boundary between mundane and sacred dissolved by a worldview that recognized no fundamental distinction. I noticed that even in this intimate family gathering, an awareness of the larger community of life remained present. When an owl called from a nearby tree, conversation paused to listen. When something rustled in the undergrowth, eyes turned toward the sound with curiosity rather than alarm. The forest at night was not an empty darkness to be feared, but a continuation of the living world they had engaged with all day, now simply expressing itself in nocturnal forms. "They do not feel alone here," the traveler observed. "Even in the depths of night, they sense themselves surrounded by presence. The trees standing their quiet watch, the animals going about their nighttime activities, the ancient rhythms that have pulsed through this place since long before humans arrived and will continue long after any individual human departs. This belonging is their greatest wealth, worth more than any material abundance. The seekers who had entered the sacred grove began to return, emerging one by one from the shadows between the guardian trees. Their faces held expressions of peaceful resolution, as if whatever questions they had carried inward had found answers. They did not speak of what they had experienced. Some wisdom, I understood, was not meant for words, but their presence as they rejoined. The village carried a quality of groundedness, of having touched something true. What did they find in there? I asked the traveler, genuinely curious. What each person needs, he replied. The forest does not give the same gift to everyone. It meets each seeker where they are, offers what will help them grow, challenges what needs challenging, confirms what needs confirming. But all of them find the same fundamental truth, that they are not separate from the world around them, that the boundary between self and forest is an illusion, that the health of each depends on the health of all. The night had fully arrived now, the village settling into the deep quiet that allowed the voices of the forest to be heard. Somewhere a stream continued its patient journey, somewhere leaves rustled with the movement of creatures going about their lives. Somewhere the earth itself seemed to breathe, the slow inhale and exhale of a living world at rest. This is what your era has largely lost, the traveler said softly. Not just the practical relationship with nature, though that matters, but this sense of belonging, this understanding that humans are not set apart from the rest of creation, not masters over it, but participants within it. When you forget this, when you see the world as something to use rather than something to join, both you and the world suffer. When you remember it, when you choose partnership over dominion, healing becomes possible for everyone. The scene began to shift around us, the forest preparing to give way to whatever era would emerge next. But before it faded, I breathed deeply of that living air, that complex fragrance of growth and decay, and the ceaseless transformation that sustains all life. I felt, for just a moment, what these people must feel every day, the profound rightness of belonging to something larger, the peace that comes from knowing one's place in the great web of existence, the gratitude that arises naturally when you truly understand how much you depend on and how much you owe to the living world that holds you. I would carry this with me, this memory of a time when humans remembered they were part of nature rather than apart from it. I would carry it back to my own era, where such remembering was so desperately needed, and I would try, however imperfectly, to live its truth. The forest faded like a dream, releasing its hold at dawn, its ancient trees and winding paths dissolving into a luminous mist that seemed to hold the essence of all the eras we had visited. I felt suspended in that timeless space between worlds, carrying within me the accumulated wisdom of ages past, when gradually something new began to take form. But this emergence felt different from the others. There was a quality of anticipation in the air, a sense that we were approaching something not yet written, not yet lived, not yet anchored in the solid ground of history. We were turning toward the future. Until now, I have shown you what has been, the traveler said, and his voice carried a new resonance, something between excitement and tenderness. Ages that have passed into memory, wisdom that waits to be rediscovered. But time flows in both directions, and I have walked its currents not only backward but forward. What I will show you now are glimpses of ages yet to dawn, possibilities that exist already in the great river of time, waiting for humanity to choose them into being. The mist parted, and I found myself looking out over a landscape that was at once familiar and transformed. Rolling hills descended toward a valley where a community had taken shape, but this was unlike any settlement I had seen in my own time or in the ancient eras we had visited. The buildings were integrated with the land in ways that seemed almost organic, their forms flowing rather than angular, their materials appearing to grow from the earth itself. Gardens and green spaces wove through everything, but these were not merely decorative. They were clearly functional parts of a living system, producing food and filtering air, and providing habitat for creatures who shared this space with human inhabitants. This is a time yet to come, the traveler said as we walked toward the community, an age when humanity has remembered much of what it forgot and integrated it with understanding that your era is only beginning to develop. They have not abandoned technology here. They have transformed their relationship with it. Tools serve life rather than the other way around. Progress is measured not by speed or consumption, but by the flourishing of all beings. As we drew closer, I began to notice details that challenged my assumptions about what the future would look like. There were no towering structures asserting human dominance over the landscape, no vehicles rushing urgently from place to place, no screens demanding attention at every turn. Instead, I saw people moving through their environment with the same unhurried grace I had observed in the ancient eras, but with an additional quality I could not immediately name. It was as if they carried a kind of lightness, a freedom from burdens I had not even realized my own time was carrying. "What happened?" I asked. "How did they get from where my time is to this?" "Through many choices made over many generations," the traveler replied. "There was no single moment of transformation, no dramatic revolution that swept away the old and installed the new. There was simply a gradual turning, a slow awakening, as more and more people began to choose differently, to value differently, to understand that the path they had been walking was leading nowhere they truly wanted to go. The future you see is not the result of force or catastrophe. It is the result of countless small decisions accumulating over time into something entirely new." We entered the community through a gateway that was more suggestion than barrier, a gentle transition from the surrounding landscape into the more cultivated space of human habitation. The first thing I noticed was the sound, or rather, the quality of sound. There was bird song, abundant and varied. There was the rustle of wind through leaves and the gentle splash of water features. There were human voices too, but they were woven through the natural sounds rather than dominating them. The overall effect was of a symphony in which humans participated rather than performed solo. A group of children played in a central green space, their game involving movement and laughter and what seemed to be some form of collaborative creativity rather than competition. Adults sat nearby, some watching the children, some engaged in quiet work that did not seem to separate them from the scene around them. The boundary between work and rest, between doing and being, appeared to have dissolved in ways I had glimpsed in ancient eras, but had thought impossible for a future that built on modern technology. "They have learned that productivity and peace are not opposites," the traveler explained, following my gaze. "In your time, there is an assumption that accomplishment requires stress, that getting things done means sacrificing well-being. But these people have discovered what the ancient builders knew, that when work emerges from purpose rather than pressure, when it unfolds at its natural pace rather than being forced into artificial timelines, both the work and the worker are better for it." A woman approached us, though I knew she could not truly see us any more than anyone in the ancient eras had. She walked with a purpose that was simultaneously relaxed, heading toward one of the buildings that seemed to serve as a gathering place. Through its transparent walls, I could see others already assembled, seated in a loose circle, engaged in what appeared to be unhurried conversation. The woman entered and was welcomed with warmth, finding her place in the circle as naturally as water finding its level. "They are discussing a question that affects their community," the traveler said. "How to respond to a request from a neighboring region for certain resources they produce. Watch how they proceed. There is no single leader dominating the discussion, no adversarial debate with winners and losers. They seek understanding together, pooling perspectives until a way forward emerges that honors everyone's needs." I watched the discussion unfold, unable to hear the words, but reading the body language, the expressions, the rhythm of turn-taking that seemed almost choreographed in its balance. When someone spoke, others listened with full attention. When someone expressed concern, space was made for that concern to be fully explored. When disagreement emerged, it was met not with defensiveness, but with curiosity, as if differing views were resources to be mined rather than obstacles to be overcome. "How long do such discussions take?" I asked. "Surely this process is slower than simply having a leader decide." "Slower in individual instances, perhaps," the traveler acknowledged, "but faster in the long term. When decisions emerge from genuine consensus, from the pooled wisdom of all affected parties, they do not need to be constantly revisited and revised. They do not generate the resistance and resentment that accompany imposed decisions. The time invested in collective discernment saves exponentially more time in implementation and ongoing harmony. We move through the community, passing spaces dedicated to different aspects of life. Here was an area where food was grown and prepared, not by specialists separated from the rest of society, but by people who move fluidly between this work and other activities throughout their days. There was a place where children learned, but learning here did not look like the classroom instruction I remembered. Children and adults of various ages worked together on projects that clearly mattered, that had real purpose, that contributed to the community while developing skills and understanding. They do not separate education from life, the traveler observed. There are no years of abstract preparation followed by years of practical application. Learning and doing are woven together from earliest childhood through the latest years. A 5-year-old contributes what a 5-year-old can contribute. An 80-year-old offers the gifts that come with 8 decades of experience. Everyone is always both teacher and student. In one corner of the learning space, I saw an elderly man sitting with a small group, telling a story that had them utterly captivated. His hands moved expressively, his face shifted to convey different characters. His voice rose and fell with the narrative's emotional arc. This too was education, I realized. The transmission of culture and wisdom through the ancient art of storytelling, preserved here into a future that had remembered what such stories were worth. We came upon a space that seemed dedicated to making and creating. People worked with their hands on projects ranging from practical objects to pure artistic expression. Some worked alone in focused concentration. Others collaborated, their separate contributions flowing together into shared creations. The atmosphere was one of absorbed engagement, the particular satisfaction that comes from bringing something into being that did not exist before. They have recovered the joy of creation, the traveler said. In your era, most people consume far more than they create. They are surrounded by objects made by distant strangers, entertainment produced by others, food grown and prepared somewhere else. But humans have an innate need to create, to shape, to contribute something uniquely their own. When that need goes unmet, something in the spirit begins to wither. These people have remembered this and structured their society to ensure that everyone has opportunities to create. A young man set aside a piece of work he had been shaping, a bowl carved from wood that would clearly be both beautiful and functional. He stretched, looked around, and caught the eye of someone across the space who was working on something made of cloth. They exchanged smiles, brief words that carried obvious affection, and then both returned to their tasks. The moment was small but revealing. Connection here was woven through everything, not something reserved for special occasions, but a constant thread in the fabric of daily life. The afternoon was shifting toward evening, the quality of light changing in ways that transformed the community into something even more beautiful. The buildings seemed to glow from within, their materials catching and reflecting the golden sunlight. Gardens that had been lovely before now became magical, their colors deepening, their fragrances intensifying as the day cooled. People began to move toward shared spaces, where evening activities would unfold. They have not abandoned the rhythms that governed ancient life, the traveler observed. Despite having technology that could make day and night interchangeable, they have chosen to honor the natural cycles. Morning is for waking energy, midday for focused work, afternoon for reflection, evening for connection, night for rest. Their bodies and minds thrive because they are aligned with patterns that humans evolved to follow over countless generations. I watched as people gathered for the evening meal, not in separate family units isolated in private spaces, but in communal areas where the boundaries between households dissolved. Long tables were set with food that had been prepared through collective effort, each person contributing according to their skills and circumstances. The meal that emerged was abundant without being excessive, delicious without being decadent, shared with the easy intimacy of people who had grown accustomed to nourishing one another. Do they still have families? I asked. Private relationships, personal bonds? Of course, the traveler replied. But family here is understood more fluidly than in your time. The nuclear unit of 2 parents and their children exists, but it is nested within larger circles of kinship that provide support and connection. Children have many adults who know them, care for them, contribute to their raising. Adults have many sources of intimacy and support, not just a single partnership expected to meet all needs. The isolation that plagues your era, the crushing pressure placed on romantic relationships to provide everything, has been relieved by a more distributed model of belonging. After the meal, as stars began to appear in the darkening sky, The community gathered in a central space that seemed designed for exactly this purpose. But they did not gather for entertainment in the passive sense I knew. They gathered to share. One by one, people offered something to the group. A song learned that day, an observation from work in the gardens, a question that had been arising during contemplation, a joy that wanted celebrating, a sorrow that needed witnessing. This is how they process their lives, the traveler explained. Not alone in private struggle, but together in shared reflection. Every evening, every person has the opportunity to bring whatever is alive in them to the attention of others. Some nights people share a great deal, other nights they simply listen. But the practice itself, the regular gathering of the community to witness one another, creates a container of support that prevents the accumulation of unprocessed experience. A child stood and shared a drawing she had made, holding it up so everyone could see, explaining what it meant to her in the simple, direct way children have. The community received her offering with the same attentiveness they had given to adult contributions, not patronizing, but genuinely engaged. The child beamed under their attention, then sat back down, nestled against her mother, having practiced early the art of sharing herself with others. She will grow up knowing that her voice matters, the traveler said, that what she creates is worth sharing, that her community will hold space for whatever she needs to express. These are gifts beyond price, foundations that will support her entire life. In your era, too many children learn the opposite, that they should be quiet, that their contributions are not valuable, that no one really wants to hear what they have to say. The wounds from such learning can take a lifetime to heal. The evening gathering continued until the stars were fully out, a canopy of ancient light above a community that had learned to live wisely. One by one, people began to drift toward rest, the gathering dissolving naturally as tiredness claimed its due. There were no abrupt endings here, no announcements that the event was over, just a gradual transition as the energy of shared connection gave way to the need for sleep. This is what awaits, the traveler said as we watched the community settle into night. Not as certainty, not as guarantee, but as possibility. The choices your generation makes, and the generation after, and the generation after that, will determine whether this future becomes reality or remains only potential. But it is possible. That is what I want you to understand. The future is not fixed. It is not predetermined. It is being created in every moment by the accumulated choices of beings like yourself. The community was quiet now, lights dimming in windows, the only sounds the natural voices of the night. Somewhere a child laughed in their sleep. Somewhere lovers murmured to each other in the darkness. Somewhere an elder sat awake a while longer, watching the stars, thinking thoughts that bridge past and future. And everywhere, the possibility of a better world, a wiser world, a more loving world, hung in the air like a promise waiting to be kept. There is more to show you, the traveler said gently, deeper into the future, where understanding has flowered even further. Are you ready to continue? I nodded, feeling the hope that this vision had kindled warming my chest like a small, steady flame. And as the peaceful community faded around us, I carried with me the knowledge that this future was not fantasy but potential, not dream but direction, waiting for enough people to choose it into being. And so, the visions fade, one into another, like waves returning to a vast and timeless sea. The traveler's hand releases mine, and I find myself back in the barn, surrounded by the familiar scent of old wood and hay, the soft sounds of night settling over the land. But something has changed. Something within me has grown quiet and still, like a pond that has finally stopped rippling, reflecting now the infinite stars above. All those ages, all those people, all that wisdom gathered across the great river of years. They are not gone. They are not separate from this moment, from this breath, from the gentle weight of your body as it rests. They are here, woven into the very fabric of existence, holding you as you have always been held, even when you did not know it. You are part of this story. You have always been part of this story. The same stars that watched over ancient gardens watch over you now. The same patience that built cathedrals across generations lives within your own steady heart. The same joy that lit 1,000 lanterns in village squares flickers gently in your chest. Even now, even here, even as sleep begins its soft approach, time flows around you like a warm current, carrying you gently, asking nothing, offering everything. The past rests peacefully behind. The future waits with quiet hope ahead. And here, in this present moment, you are exactly where you need to be. Safe. Held. Part of something far larger and far more loving than words can capture. Let your breath deepen. Let your body grow heavy against whatever supports you. Let the last thoughts of the day drift away like clouds crossing a moonlit sky. There is nothing you need to do now. Nothing you need to solve or fix or understand. Only rest, only peace, only the gentle release into the arms of night. The traveler is gone, but the gift remains. The knowledge that you belong. The truth that you are loved by ages past and ages yet to come. The quiet certainty that when you wake, you will carry this peace with you, a small flame that nothing can extinguish. Sleep now, let go. The river of time will hold you,